think a lot of people, when we first look at it and think about it, we think about the cross fencing, rotational grazing side of it. But I'd really like to hear a little bit more about some specific examples of how you're using virtual fence to aid in conservation, work with the wildlife, and just some of those examples, if you don't mind.
I don't mind it one bit. One is on, of course, we all understand that a well-managed cattle ranch is a well-managed wildlife corridor. Is a wildlife haven. We have a lot of different, aspects and variation of ecosystems that these edges promote the growth of wild. So let me do the wildlife portion of it, and then I can get into water quality and water quantity in here because we live in Florida, where I've got 1,000 by the end of the podcast. This time tomorrow there'll be 1,000 new residents in my state. Multiply that times 7 days, and you see the growth that we have. So with the wildlife, we're now able to move those cattle and segregate those cattle and identify perhaps birthing areas for wading birds. For here we have a somewhat species of listed concern with the burrowing owls, that if it's nesting time, we can eliminate cattle grazing from some of these areas. We can intensely graze some of those areas to where it's going to be more suitable for them to reproduce. So whether it's ducks or wading birds, Osceola turkeys, wildlife like quail, turkeys, we can manage those cattle of where they go and how much they graze or not graze. If it is nesting time for some of these nesting birds in our ephemeral wetlands, which we refer to as sloughs or ponds or creeks, but the ephemeral wetlands don't hold water year round, I can, by the stroke of a pen and just click, excuse me, not by a pen, I can take a mouse. And with that mouse, I can build more fence in about 30 minutes than I could in 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. Because I can go through, and at times, and we're getting ready to use this mouse to build about 50 miles of fence. And probably in about 30 minutes, that I am going to fence off every ephemeral wetland that we have, because I've got water sources everywhere else. Our creeks are full, our ponds are full, it's raining, we're in hurricane season. I can click around all those ephemeral wetlands and eliminate cattle from going in there. That way the nesting birds have an opportunity, they don't have that issue. But more importantly than that, I am letting those natural grasses like big maiden cane, small maiden cane, and we do have West Indian marsh grass down here that we manage for grazing in these. I let that grow up. I've now stockpiled a lot of grass for the winter season, which starts in about November. Let's call it November in Florida. So I have now reduced or eliminated wholly any cows from going into those areas. I'm grown it up. Wildlife is just gone fantastic because they have that ability to hide from predators. The grass is higher, there comes into a lot of things in here. I'm not a wildlife biologist. My wife is. Besides being a rancher, she's a wildlife biologist, so I have one of the best, I think, in the state of Florida that's advising me on doing these things. Now, taking it further, that without these barbed wire fences, we all know that occasionally we will have an elk or a white-tailed deer or a mule deer or something hung up in a fence. We can't eliminate barbed wire fences. It just won't happen. But this gives us the ability to put a lot more fences up without that major cost and accomplish not only the grazing programs we want to facilitate on our different ranches, whether you're in Oregon or Florida. We have different ways that we are going to graze these cattle at different times of the year. We can accomplish that and help wildlife. So that's the story of wildlife. So the next story is of growth and water and quality. That living in Florida, We call it ridge to river to reef, that we have a spine of Florida, that we've got the mountains of Florida. We might elevate up to about 80 feet above sea level. You know, those of you in Montana that might be listening to this, that's the mountains of Florida. So that water, every drop of water that lands in Florida is either going to the Atlantic over on the east side, or it's going to the Gulf of Mexico over on the west side. So it's going to go somewhere. Our huge population growth centers are along the coast of Florida. And so everybody is concerned with water, because water is life in Florida. And so if we can protect those ephemeral systems, then we're doing a really great job with water quality and water quantity. And so that in itself helps. Can I go to the next, what I think is really important?
Absolutely.
The next one is, I live again in hurricane and rainbow world. Hurricanes devastate us. I think on this one ranch we have 161 miles of fence. A lot of fencing. And I don't mean we don't have it cut up in paddocks of 40 acres. But we have a lot of fencing. The first thing I do, I have learned after putting these collars around cattle, and now I think we've got, I don't know, 500, 600, 700 head of cows on 3 different ranches covered by 7 cell towers. The first thing I do is see if the computer is on. If the computer comes up and I have power, which we do have generators here, if I have power and my cell towers have all survived, plus the big cell towers, and we happen to use Verizon cell service with our cattle. As soon as I get on the computer and I look at the screen, I can see where my cattle are. If it's working, I can see where my cattle are. And we just went through at times 165 mile an hour winds sustained at 120 mile an hour with gusts and 22 inches of rain. I can tell you I've gone through 3 hurricanes with the Vence system, and when I have clicked on it, if I have power on my computer, I have found that those cell towers withstood that. So now, with that being said, I can see where my cattle are. Because just prior to a hurricane hitting, we open every gate on every interior gate on every ranch. That at times we have an ocean that would cover thousands of acres in Florida. We are ranchers in Florida. A lot of us go through this, tremendous amount. I want those cattle to be able to walk or swim to go to high ground.